Okay, hello everyone. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I had some difficulty connecting, but now we're all ready to go. So if Felipe hasn't started you yet, I don't think he did, let's go ahead and do 5 minutes of meditation. So be sure that you set up your posture before you start and that you also set a positive motivation for participating in the class, and then spend some time calming your mind, either focusing on the breath or focusing on awareness. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So nice to see you all again, or many of you. And the rest I just know are there. Okay, so let's do some review from yesterday. So yesterday we were still talking about this topic of renunciation. So this creating space in our lives to turn our minds toward the Dharma. So to look at, let's see, to spend some time developing our minds, making our minds more flexible, knowing that the source of our happiness does not exist within external things, that even if we had all the perfect circumstances, that's no guarantee that we would be happy. That in fact, happiness is about our attitude toward things, and that we can actually be happier with whatever conditions arise, even very difficult ones like we're going through now, that we can still, if we approach them with a different point of view, then we can still be joyful and be happy. And we're going to talk some more about that today. To review, we talked yesterday about one of the thoughts that turn the mind. So we have these 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward Dharma. So by meditating on each one of these, it motivates us to practice, to spend time on the cushion, meditating, to do our studying, to do our classes, to read books, to actually do the work that is necessary to start to change the mind and change these habits, because our habits in our minds are very, very powerful and very strong, and we have typical ways in which we react to situations that either from imprints in past lives or from ways that we have learned to respond to situations in this life, um, through getting hurt, or feeling hopeless, or feeling overwhelmed, or feeling very anxious. And these are habits of the mind that are very much based in how we see the world, how we view the world. And usually it's very concrete beliefs that we have about the world that that lead to this suffering feeling. And then when we have these suffering feelings, these afflictive emotions, then as a result, we act on them. We say things and we do things that create more suffering for ourselves. Either we harm other people or we harm ourselves. And so learning to be able to see things differently and start to even change the responses that we have to situations. This comes through meditation. Okay, so looking at the 4 thoughts that turn the mind are the precious human life, death and impermanence, suffering, the suffering of existence, and karma. So let's review the precious human life that we talked about yesterday. So the fact that we have this very, very precious situation, and that it is subject to change. And we're actually experiencing that, like I talked about yesterday. Our whole world has been turned upside down as a result of this pandemic. And, things are very different now, and this change happened very quickly. So we can see how even this precious situation that we have right now can change very quickly, and we can lose it. So then we need to use it as much as possible while we have it. So having a human body, having a human mind, very precious, very useful in developing ourselves spiritually. The mind that is able to learn and understand, that we have a path. We have Buddhism that still exists in the world, that we have the religious freedom to be able to practice it, to explore it, that these materials are available, that we have access to these classes, is not necessarily true for everyone in the world.
that we have personally interest in spiritual practice. We aren't just focused on the material. So some other things, part of this precious human life, we're not alone in our spiritual practice. We have like-minded people. You know, I think I said yesterday, if I only had 2 or 3 people in this class listening to me, I don't know that I would be all that motivated to do it, but we're up to like 160 some, which just means that all over the world, you aren't alone, right? You have support from all these people, you know, who are, you know, considering this view, you know, and very like-minded in many ways, and it's not necessarily a very popular view, you know. I was very much brought up and very reinforced in my culture about this American dream, you know, and I know that exists all over the world, even not just in America. This idea of how material prosperity and this view of, you know, what movies and commercials show, that this is the way that we want our lives to be, instead of seeing that maybe simplicity and maybe, you know, living with less and maybe having a more contemplative existence, or an existence that's more based in our values rather than constantly greed and short term and like this. But we do have the material conditions. We have enough, you know, to support us in our practice. And then we have enough freedom from suffering, so we aren't, you know, overwhelmed with sickness right now. So we do have this opportunity and the freedom to be able to practice, to sit on the cushion, to listen, you know, to consider. Because if you've ever been really, really sick, you don't want to do anything except for lay there and sleep, you know, when you're really sick. So then there's not a lot of motivation to work with your mind. And then you have access to qualified spiritual teachers, because Buddhism still exists, because people have, you know, encouraged teachers, encouraged schools, you know, seen this as valuable. So then qualified teachers still exist. So I have a quote on renunciation here from Lama Yeshe's Introduction to Tantra, and I might have gone over it yesterday, I don't remember, but we can read it again. So renunciation indicates a deep, heartfelt decision, definitely to emerge from the repeated frustrations and disappointments of ordinary life. This is our usual way of thinking. Simply stated, renunciation is the feeling of being so completely fed up with our recurring problems that we are finally ready to turn away from our attachments to this and that and begin searching for another way to make our life satisfying and meaningful. Okay. So this is renunciation, this decision that we're going to do something about the fact that we continue to, you know, respond to our external circumstances in a way that creates more suffering for ourselves. So then let's also review the types of meditation. So I talked about mainly 3 types of meditation. And we did a meditation last night on the calm abiding. So calm abiding, also known as shamatha, involves a single pointed focus. So we're actually making the mind flexible, so that when we do come to this analytic and this actually changing the mind, we have a control over where our mind is going. And we have developed these deeper states of meditation that start to affect our habitual way of thinking. So this book that I talked about in the first course, it's called Altered Traits by Richard Davidson and Daniel Goleman. They talk about, it's called Altered Traits because through meditation, both of the types of meditation combined, we can actually start changing our personality and changing our level of happiness. So if we feel like we're a really angry person, or we're a really shy person, or a really depressed person, or something like this, we can start to see that those actual traits, which are pretty deep-seated habitual ways of thinking, that through meditation, those can actually be changed. Okay, and this has been shown in this book. They outline all the research related to it. So part of that is developing this calm abiding. It involves relaxation, it involves clarity on the object, so becoming more engaged with your object is the clarity. Especially we start off usually with the breath because it's easy to find, but by developing that ability to become introspective, to look closely at something as subtle as the breath. And as you do this, the breath will become more and more hard to find. So that means that you have to look more closely to actually detect even these subtle, the soft levels of the breath. And so that hones your focus even more and makes your mind even more flexible, because in order to find that and in order to stay with that, you have to develop a certain training over your mind that actually will continue to stay on the object. And so it also allows you to learn to deal with the distractions that come in, that start to pull you away. So and as a result of having to deal with those distractions, you become more aware of them. You're like, oh, look, I'm thinking about that song again, or I'm thinking about this person again, or I'm thinking about this problem again. And you start to see, this is the way my mind usually works. Okay, so in analytic, we analyze a topic, we start to see things differently, we question it, we debate it, we come to a conclusion about things. And of course, you can use analytic meditation in problems that you're working with in your own mind, as well as the analysis of spiritual topics that start to change your mind. And then mindfulness is this open awareness, includes being aware of the presence of consciousness, and it brings you into the present moment, which actually helps you in a lot of ways to, again, become aware of your usual ways of thinking, so that you can know, what is it that is motivating me? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And how am I, how are these emotions that I feel like are just coming over me out of my control? What are the thoughts that are generating those emotions? Okay, so I wanted to talk about some antidotes within shamatha, so a little bit more about this calm abiding. So give me just a second. Okay. All right. So what can happen when we're meditating is that we can have either, usually the way it works is that we go from excitation, being, really busy, our minds being so busy that we can't even settle, we can't even relax, and we can't even focus on one thing because so many things are popping up in our minds. And usually when a lot of things are popping up in our mind, then we're also very distracted by whatever is going on around us, whether it's sounds or sights or whatever. So the first thing we can do to try to work with this is that we can loosen our focus. So the way I taught it in the last class is that we can hold things more lightly. So only a part of your mind is holding the object, instead of clamping down on it, making it too intense. Okay, to hold it, we have to actually loosen it up a little bit. We can also lower our chin. Sometimes when we're excited, we're more distracted looking up, so we can lower our chin, close our eyes slightly, so we meditate with our eyes open. But you can get to the point where all you do is just let a little light in, but not actually see anything. And you shouldn't be focusing on anything external anyway. It should be more of an internal and introspective. So, and I had one friend who talked about that she focuses on the peripheral, on what is on the edges. And that helps her to not be seeing what is in front of her and distracted by that. We can think of a serious topic like the fact that we don't have a lot of time to, to practice. So we need to get serious now. So thinking about the rarity of the precious human rebirth and the fact that death and impermanence are a fact of reality. So our situation could change at any time. So we need to really use this time that we have, we have created to meditate. And then if we do get pulled away by some thought, we can relax. The first thing we do is relax, we've recognized that we're no longer on the object. We relax our bodies, then we release the thought, whatever it was, and then we return, bring the mind back to the object. Now the other problem that we often have is one of dullness, or is like a type of sleepiness. Okay, in its extreme form, it is falling asleep, but it can also be more like spacing out, when we're kind of we're kind of aware of our breath but not really, and we're just kind of not thinking about anything at all. So our mind isn't very focused on anything. So in this case, then we would tighten up the focus, but we wouldn't tighten it so much that then we go and create more distraction. So it becomes this introspective awareness of when we're starting to lose focus and drift off, we tighten things up. And then if we tighten it up too much, we start noticing like there are more thoughts coming. So then we loosen the focus a little bit, relax a little bit, and come back. And in the process of our meditation, as we get better and better at meditation, we start to, this back and forth becomes less and less. For many of us, when we first start, we're very excited all the time, and maybe we learn to relax, but then we always fall asleep. And so that we have this huge back and forth. And as we get better and better, our back and forth becomes closer and closer and closer, until it's like we just ride. We ride whatever the object is, and the mind and the object just sort of become one. And it's very easy to stay with it. It's almost like the object draws the mind, because the mind wants to be there. It learns that it's a restful place. So we can also, if we're feeling dullness, spaciness, falling asleep, open the eyes slightly, lift the chin, raise the sternum. When we're falling asleep or getting dull, we often slump, right? You can imagine a bright light, or an inspiring topic, so bodhicitta or Buddha potential, and this can get you re-engaged. And then if you notice again that you're becoming dull, you're losing your focus, you can refresh your interest in whatever it is, your topic or your object. So become more engaged with the breath, finding more the parts of the breath. You restore your attention, and then you stay with it, you retain. And then if you're really falling asleep and you're just nodding off, you may need to take a break. Okay. So I want to move on now to attachment. Okay, so we talked about anger, which is one of the, so they talk about 5 main afflictive or negative emotions, but delusions, I'd say, actually, because ignorance doesn't seem like it's an emotion. But ignorance, attachment, anger, jealousy, and pride. Okay, so we can talk about jealousy being a combination of anger and attachment. And ignorance is at the root of all the other 4, which we've talked about before, but tomorrow we'll talk about more. But so focusing on anger and attachment, because those are really the 2 main delusions that sort of get us, right? They get us in terms of creating a situation in which we harm ourselves or we harm others, which creates more suffering for ourselves. So when we talked about anger, we talked about the fact that it is a function of the mind, a way in which we perceive things in our environment. And it's a perception that exaggerates the negative. Okay, so when we're talking about attachment, here we're talking about exaggerating the positive. Okay, seeing things as somehow much more desirable and much more attractive than they actually are. So hold on just a second. Okay, so when I'm talking about attachment, I'm not talking about bonding. Okay, so there's a whole field in Western psychology that talks about, they call it attachment theory, which is this theory of the bonding that happens between caregivers and babies when they're first born. And it's very, very important for these babies to bond well and effectively and in a healthy way with their caregivers. And so when I'm talking about attachment as a negative thing, I'm not talking about bonding, okay? I think that parents and babies should bond, okay? I'm not sure that this translation is that good. Sometimes I think a better translation is more like obsessive desire. But obsessive desire even maybe exaggerates it a little bit too much. So sometimes we've had the feeling of obsessive desire, like when we have someone that we're attracted to and they don't want to be with us, and then we can't stop thinking about it, right? That's more like an example of obsessive desire, right? And but we can have obsessive desire for other things and it not feel so strong until we are able to start to detect it in ourselves. So that's why in some ways attachment is a good word for this, okay? And sometimes attachment gets mixed up with love. So when we talk about falling in love with someone, sometimes falling in love is filled with attachment, but one can also love someone. We can love our children, we can love our parents, we can love our partner without necessarily having attachment, okay? We can have connection, we can have love in the sense of wanting them to be happy, but attachment often has this element of expectation, of strings attached. Like, I love you and I want you to be happy, but you should also be a certain way for me too, okay? And it's very hard to get rid of, especially in close relationships. We often have expectations of others, of how they should love us, who they should be in order to be in relationship with us, okay? So let's look at how this sort of comes about. Again, looking at this perception diagram like we looked at with anger. So remember that we have the flower. So let's do this. Okay, so we have this flower right here that is, oh, it doesn't work. Okay, so we have a flower, and then we have the photons that are actually light particles that are bouncing off the flower that are then coming into our eyeball right there, and they're creating when they hit the back of the eye, the retina, they create certain chemical and electrical responses in our eye, which travel along this nerve here, and then they go actually to the back part of our brain, and then our brain processes that, right? And we say that an image appears in our mind that is a reflection of what these sense stimulus have caused, okay? So an image appears, and we do certain things. When we perceive something, the mind actually does certain functions on that image that we are creating. Okay, so it isn't necessarily an accurate image of what is out there in reality. Okay, because what is out there in reality is photons, and it's molecules, and it's it's sound waves sometimes, and it's light waves, and it isn't necessarily what we create in our mind. Is also all the experiences we have ever had and all the learning we've ever done that is related to those same stimulus, those same light waves that are coming in, and our all of our ideas about what a flower is and what a flower should be, and whoever taught us the label for flower. Okay, so when we see a flower and we have this perception, sometimes what also happens is we have this positive feeling that arises when we contact that thing. Now, the positive feeling that arises is a dependent arising, right, from the flower, but we mistakenly think that the good feeling is in the flower. Okay, so this is where attachment happens, because we think that the good feeling is from the outside wholly, that it is coming from the external stimulus. Then we forget that, and we think that the good feeling is in the flower. So as a result, we develop clinging, and grasping, and we exaggerate the negative, the positive aspects of the flower in the way that we think that it is the source of the good feeling. Okay, that's an exaggeration of its positive qualities. And then when we want to cling and grasp to it, we even justify that. Like, when we buy something, let's say we spend a lot of money, to buy a new phone. Well, now this phone, they've done studies on this. Our perception of things actually changes when it becomes ours. We see it as more positive because we've spent money on it, right? So even if we thought it was attractive before, now when we put energy into it, it even appears more attractive to us. Okay, so this is this function, this mind that then forgets that it has arisen in the mind and is actually in the thing, creates this clinging, this grasping. Okay, so then let's look at what it is. So attachment exaggerates the positive aspects of something. It also exaggerates its existence as somehow existing out there separate from my mind. That's another thing that it does. And it sees the object or person as the source of our lasting happiness. So then we get this feeling that I can't be happy unless I have this thing, because it's out there and because it made me feel good once. And then we want to hold on to that. We want those good feelings to continue. We want to be happy. So we become more clinging and more grasping. And we want to hold on to that thing, which creates a lot of problems because things are constantly changing. They are impermanent. And if they're going to change, they are not always going to be the source of our happiness. Okay, relationships, anything that you can imagine, housing situations, jobs, food, everything is always, that is the product of causes and conditions, is impermanent. It is always changing. And so are we. Okay, so even if something made me happy at one time in my life, it may not continue to make me happy. And in relationships, when I have a more realistic view that things are constantly changing, then I find happiness with people in different, as they change. We re-fall in love with the new person that they are. And we come to expect that they're going to change. And that's okay. That's actually a good thing. And it makes them more interesting. But often what happens is when we fall in love, we have this real powerful feelings, and we see only the positive aspects of the person. And then as we start to get to know them better, and we start to get to know their negative aspects, we think that they're, you know, that they're no longer worthy of our love, right? Because we couldn't see it before, and now all of a sudden we think they've changed into this negative person, when some of those things were already there, we just couldn't see them when we fall in love. So if we're more aware of that, we're more aware of, you know, the both sides of a person, and love them anyway, then our relationships are actually going to last longer. Okay, so what are some of the antidotes to attachment? So the first thing that we can look at is this impermanence. Okay, when we remember that things are constantly changing, that they are not always going to be the source of our happiness, then we are much more comfortable when they do change, and we don't expect them to stay the same and give us happiness in exactly the same way that they always have. So the more we can become aware of the fact that someday the iPhone is going to break, you know, and then we don't become so attached to it, thinking it's the, you know, it's the greatest thing ever, right? Yeah, and advertising, they don't, you know, they, like, even the iPhone, you know, you'll see in airports, you know, you see these ads, and they have them, you know, just up there, and they're perfect, and there are no scratches on them, and they're brand new, and they're gorgeous, and they don't even put the price, you know, on iPhones. They don't put the price on the advertising, because they don't want you to know the negative aspects of it, that it's really expensive, right? It's a lot of money. And so they don't want to advertise that part. No, they advertise this mystique, you know, of the phone, right? But if we're smart, we'll see, well, how long is this phone going to last me? Do I really want to invest this much money in something that's going to only last, you know, for a certain amount of time? You know, so impermanence. Okay, we can practice letting go, not holding so tightly to things, imagining situations in which are without the person. Like my parents, you know, learning to get used to the idea that my mom is not always going to be in this world. And that's really hard for me, but I do it because I want her to have a good death. And I don't want to be overwhelmed when she passes away. I want to be comfortable with the fact that it's going to happen someday. I don't know when it's going to happen, and I want to be kind of ready for it. And it's not that I'm like wanting her to die. I'm not saying that. I'm just getting ready, because this is the reality. This is what is life. And the more that I try to ignore it and pretend it's not going to happen, the more I'm going to suffer when it does. And then practicing gratitude and contentment. Okay. Yep, we're still good. I don't know. Okay. So practicing gratitude. Gratitude is being happy with what we have. Contentment is being at peace and not necessarily wanting more. So they relate to each other. I practice gratitude a lot. I somehow developed a really good habit in just being happy when, you know, with my life. Just like, I'm so thankful for this, and I'm so thankful for this, and I'm so thankful for this. And then I was working on this particular one of contentment, which in the 16 guidelines, it's being at peace and happy with what we have and who we are. And so I spent like 24 hours. I was doing this course, you know, on the 16 guidelines, which are these different values, and contentment is one of them. So I kept bringing it to mind throughout the day, 24 hours. And what I realized is that I can have a lot of gratitude and be happy, but I can also have this sense of wanting more, right? And contentment is about being happy with whatever we have and not really needing to have more. You know, not really needing to grasp, because I spent, I don't know how many months last year planning and wanting these trips that I did. I did a big vacation to, you know, did some retreats and some travel last winter. And I spent so much time, you know, just wanting that. And now it's done, right? And I don't really have any plans. I'm not doing that again this year. And I noticed there's a lot more peace. There's a lot more freedom. Um, And you know, and I mean, this is just my personal situation, but I'm not making a lot of money right now. Okay, which is fine actually, because I don't have this need to make a lot of money, because I don't have this big vacation plan for this year. Last year I was really grasping and clinging at what all the money I was making. So I feel much more content. And then I do have kind of a thing I might want to do, but I'm much more relaxed about it. And if it doesn't happen, that'll be fine too. Okay, so some other uh, uh, antidotes to attachment. We can think about the disadvantages of whatever it is we're feeling attached to, because everything has both positive and negative sides, and even the disadvantages of being attached. And I'll talk about this more. I want to get through the slide. Remember the negative aspects of desirable people, objects, and situations. And recognize how our mind creates the experience of obsessive desire. So thinking about the disadvantages of attachment, one of the main disadvantages is that when we're clinging and grasping to things is, well, with people, we become very possessive. And then we get really angry and upset and scared that we're going to lose that person. Okay. And that is really uncomfortable, one. And two, it interferes with our ability to enjoy being with that person, to just, accepting who they are and our situation right now. And that is much more fun than constantly worrying about whether you're going to keep them or not, whether they're going to stay with you or not. So attachment can bring lots of feelings of worry and anxiety. Some other disadvantages is that we end up manipulating people to get what we want. We become who we think they want to love instead of being who we are. And that's really uncomfortable. We can, hurt other people to get what we want. We take, stealing, just like tricking, lying to get what we want. All of these, negative things that we do, we can really harm others when we become attached to certain things and feel like we have to have them. In jobs, sometimes we feel like we have to have the promotion, and then it might lead us to, complaining about our coworkers or trying to make them look bad, and that's really sad. Or if it doesn't work out with someone who we thought was the source of our happiness, then we blame them and we get all angry at them and we create lots of resentment. And yeah, it's not, it's better to be more, content, with things and what we have. We can also remember the negative aspects of what we see as desirable people, objects, situations. So every so often, remembering that that what we're so attached to is not perfect, right? It just is not everything we ever wanted. It's nice, we're happy we have it, but remembering that, and then you can even practice giving it up. Sometimes I do that. I have a really nice living space right now. And I was, when we were doing the meditation this morning on attachment, which we'll do with Felipe after this class, I was thinking about the fact that, that the negative aspects of where I live, and how my perception. I remember thinking, I feel like I have a lot of space, okay, because I have 2 rooms and a bathroom and a kitchen, which is like huge, but yet I think about like people who live in houses, like with like 3-bedroom houses. I think they would think I was like in this really, really small space. So I'm like so attached to it because it has so much room. But from a different perspective, people would be like, you live in that little place, So seeing that it isn't absolutely attractive, and so then I'm like, well, yeah, it's not that, is it really that great? Not that I would really want anything bigger, but still, it makes me not so like thinking it's the greatest thing in the world. Okay. Okay. And then recognize how our mind creates the experience of obsessive desire. So one thing we can do is, you know, in relationships, say we, you know, I meet, we'll say I'm not a nun, okay? Just pretend I'm not a nun. And I meet a guy, you know, who has this really nice body. He's got like the 6-pack or whatever, you know, and he's really interesting. He's a Buddhist, you know. He's like, maybe he's independently wealthy. He's got a plane, or, you know, and travels all over the world, right? And he's interested in me, right? So you have all these things, all these aspects of him, and I start getting really attached and thinking, this is the guy for me, right? So then I can start to look, okay, where within this person is the thing that makes me happy? Okay, where, you know, try to start taking apart all these aspects of this person. So is it in his body? Okay, if I just had a body there and there was no mind there, would I really be so attracted to that? Probably not, right? It'd be like kind of boring, wouldn't it? You know, if there was no consciousness, it was just a body, right? So let's say, okay, let's say it's the fact that he's independently wealthy, right? But there could be people who have lots and lots of money that I would not want to have anything to do with, right? Oh, okay, it's because he's a Buddhist. Well, I have lots of Buddhist friends, and I don't have the same, you know, overwhelming attraction to them necessarily, right? So it's the package, isn't it? It's the combination of all these things. And it's because my mind has put all these things together and said, that is what is desirable for me. And again, the other thing is that, you know, when we first fall in love with someone, we think that everybody else sees them as attractive as we do, right? So we get all worried about how everybody else, we think everybody else is going to fall in love with that person. And it's just not true, you know? It just doesn't happen that way. In fact, there are people who don't, you know, like they don't see them as particularly attractive, and they don't want anything to do with them, right? So if the person was attractive within themselves, then everyone would see that person that way, and they don't, which shows that it's actually a narration. It's a story that I have made in my mind. And I can do that with anything. I can do that with you know, jobs or vacations, you know, trips that I want to take. I can do that with objects. You know, just start to see how I have created the story that this thing is so attractive and I have to have it in order to be happy. Okay. So let's do a breakout group now for the next 10 minutes. Where we, so like we did yesterday, and if you weren't here yesterday, Zoom has this amazing feature where it divides people into groups, and I think we'll go up to 50, and that'll put about three people in each group. Yeah, maybe 4 in some. And then you can talk about this question. So let me share this. So what is the difference between love and attachment? Okay, so, and you can use any kind of examples. You know, you can use love, romantic love, you can use love for parents and children, and the difference between love and attachment. And please engage in this. This is a way to take your learning of the concept deeper, to start to contemplate exactly what these concepts mean. And you do this better through discussion, okay? And yeah, and just if you don't like it, just get over it. Go beyond your shyness and engage. Okay, go ahead, Felipe, divide everybody up, and then I'll see you back here in about 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm muting all and starting the groups.
Oh no, I'm in a breakout room.
Hey, how's it going? Oh, no way! Hey, that's awesome. Okay. Yeah, we do. Wow, how cool.
Hello?
Yeah, you too.
Rupali, you're muted. Sometimes Zoom mutes you without, without you wanting to. Dayanira, are you there?
I'm volunteering.
I can't hear anything.
Yeah, it's so cool that we got connected. Cool.
Hi, the same thing happened with me. I am not assigned to a room.
Which
I'm not sure.
you were assigned to room 1, but
Okay.
let me change that and see if it works again.
Breakout room 2. I just got an invite for that.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
welcome.
Hello.
Okay. Okay. I have 3 people now in the room. Were you unassigned to a breakout room? What happened? No? Let me see.
Just by definition, love is this idea of I want you to be happy forever.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, we can't see you.
No, we're in breakout rooms right now. Were you not assigned to a breakout room?
We lost power in between, so we kind of went offline. So is it possible that we get into can you
Sure.
Yeah?
Let me assign you to one room right now.
Thank you.
There you go. I sent you now the invitation.
Okay. So the breakout rooms are still going.
Yeah, it seems that it worked even without us in the session. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
it's great. Good timing.
Yeah. But there are 56 people. So I guess they're finishing.
Yeah, it's 5 more seconds for the breakout group. So now it will bring them back automatically.
Good, good. Okay. Good. Welcome back. So we can take some questions now. So if you have questions, you can type them in the chat and then we'll talk directly. We can spend about 10 minutes doing Q&A before we go to some meditation on attachment. But you can ask questions about those antidotes to calm abiding too, if you'd like.
Okay, we have one question from Carmen. So you're unmuted, you can ask now.
Hello.
Hi. Well, let me
Hi.
cancel the spotlight. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I have a question about attachments. I've been working a lot on attachments and so on, and I find this situation when you are the object of others' attachments, and it bothers you so much. So I have this this thought about maybe I am too attached to my non-attachment. You know what I mean? And how to be with a person that you like, you want, you love, not a partner,
Right.
but he's wanting more and more.
Well, I mean, the best way to work with people who have any kind of affliction, whether it's anger or attachment, is to try to have a dialogue about it, to have, you know, let them know that you feel uncomfortable with them having this delusion about you, that you are a regular person and that you are not the source of their ultimate happiness, and that you can still be friends, but it would be better if they learn to not be so intense about it, right? If they could see, you know, find other things that make them happy, get used to the idea that, you know, if you're not in their life, they would still be able to be happy. Things like this. Not that you have to leave, but just that it could be. And if they could get used to that. Yeah. And you know, your attachment to your non-attachment, I think that sometimes we don't connect with people because we're afraid of them becoming too attached to us. And I'm not sure that's the way to handle it, like, because people are going to have delusions about you, and it's something that's happening in their mind, right? And it's not necessarily something that you can control. So being kind to them, you know, wanting them to be happy without strings attached, because that's expecting them not to be attached to you is a string in some ways, isn't it? Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I expect them to not get attached to me. You know,
Yes.
if my example of life or whatever must last for them to, you know, to show them that that's not the way with me.
Right. Right. Yeah, you can be a role model, but not in a rejecting way, right? You want to be understanding and be compassionate with the fact that they're developing this delusion. And unconditional love would say that you still want them to be happy, whether they're, you know, whether they're having their delusions or not. Yeah.
That also is not to feel guilty about saying those kind of things, because not everybody understands, you know.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and you know, and romantic love in movies, it's like that's the way you're supposed to be in love. You're only in love if it hurts, you know? That it's rare that we have examples of, you know, two people who are in love where they don't get angry or upset or hurt when the other person does something different, you know? We just don't have those examples so much in our culture. So talking about that, actually it's a better way to love when there's more freedom, more letting go, more acceptance. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Venerable, there's a few people asking if you could show the slides of the antidotes again, and then
Okay.
I'll connect you with one person who has a question about one of the particular antidotes.
Okay. So here's the first one. Oops. And then here's the second one.
Okay, and on that one, I will unmute Karthik, so you can ask your question about.
Thank you, Felipe. Good afternoon, Venerable. It's amazing to hear about this stuff. It's so helpful to work through things. In terms of my question, it's just the slide that we're on right now, the second one. Remember negative aspects of desirable people, objects, and situations. I just wondered if you could give a few more examples of that, because I'm just really trying to take that apart and just understand that properly. Just specific to my day-to-day life. Really.
Okay. So I gave the example of the iPhone and the price, right? Another thing, you know, with people, I think that as we grow older, we learn to accept people with both their negative and their positive sides. You know, so there are probably relationships in your life that you don't say, oh, I don't want to be friends with this person anymore because they, you know, waste too much money or because they party too much, unless it's affecting you directly, right? So, and everyone has these aspects of themselves that are not particularly positive, you know. Everybody has bad habits, you know. Maybe a friend of yours talks too much, or maybe they, you know, but you still love them because they also have positive aspects. Like maybe they're very friendly and you enjoy when they talk to you sometimes, and you know, so it's taking the good with the bad, okay? In anything, you know, in any situation. Like sometimes jobs have really positive aspects of, you know, being interesting, but maybe they have a negative aspect in that they don't pay very much, you know. So you always in any situation have both of these aspects, and if you can start to see all the sides of whatever it is that you're feeling like you have to have, you know, this obsessive desire that you can't live without, if you start to see that it's got all this balance, you're less likely to develop that feeling of it's the only way I can be happy and I have to have it, and this, oh, and if I, you know, this fear that I'm going to lose it, you know, kind of thing. Because if it's not that great, you know, if it's both good and bad, then you start to see that that you can do without it, right? It's not the most, you know, important thing in the whole world for you to be happy.
I find it quite difficult, and just in the context where you're trying to just see the positive, or just being optimistic perhaps, and you know, sometimes it is necessary to see the other side of it. And you know, in those situations where you're just trying to be positive, for example, I mean, I find it very hard to balance the two, and this antidote is really striking at looking at reality as it is. And yeah, there are situations where I find that balance hard, and so I'll really contemplate on what you said and think about it.
Okay, good.
Thank you
So
much.
let's, yeah, you're welcome. Let's go to meditation, Felipe, because we're getting a little late.
Sure, let's get it started then. Please, all of you, go back to a meditation posture. Set up a nice, comfortable position that you can sustain during the session. And bring yourself into your body and try to become grounded and stable. And with the bell, let's all take a moment to come back into the space of the body first. Just take a couple of minutes to settle down once more, to let your body go back to its natural state, a state of balance and relaxation. Letting go of any signs of tension, tightness in the body, letting go of any worries or concerns in the mind. And just taking a moment to actually experience your body in its natural state by letting go of the doing energy of the mind. Simply be with the body as it is. Let it rest. And from this state of calmness and relaxation, using this as our baseline for the meditation, how you can let go of observing the space of the body and move on to the space of the mind. So first of all, to start this meditation on attachment, you can let your mind come up with some objects of attachment. It can be things, people, places that you're attached to. So you can go through a mental list of this different objects of attachment. And now choose one particular object, perhaps one that you're most attached to, or whatever your mind goes to directly. A thing, a person, or a place that you're attached to, and stay with it. Trying to visualize it as clearly as possible in front of you. Check your emotional reaction to having the object present. To really get a sense of what happens to the mind. What does it feel like when there's something that you're attached to close by? And now, analyzing this object of attachment, try to identify the qualities or the characteristics that you attribute to the object, that which attracts you to it. You can start by checking your senses. Notice if what you like about the object is the way it looks, the way it smells, the way it feels to the touch, the way it tastes, and so forth. Or perhaps those characteristics are not tangible, but rather more of a mental attitude. You like the object because of how it makes you feel, because of its functionality, because of its appeal. So now consider this. Do you think that these qualities are really present within the object itself? But if that were true, shouldn't everyone else see those same qualities in that same object as well? Really check to see if your own perception, if your own ego are involved in the process. And in this way, we can acknowledge that we actually project a lot of the qualities into the object from our side. And one of the other attributes that we impute on the object is that of permanence. So check to see if you have a sense that this person, thing, or place will always be there to satisfy your needs and to give you constant happiness. Even if the answer intellectually is no, I know it's not going to be there. But maybe it's more of a subtle feeling. But is that even possible? Is it possible for this object not to change? So bring in an awareness of impermanence. Try to acknowledge how this object is changing. Noticing how, just like everything in the universe, this thing, person, or place will change and eventually disintegrate. So ask yourself, can this bring everlasting happiness? What is there to cling to? So now as an exercise to really get a feeling of what attachment does to your mind and to your stability, imagine that you bring this object of attachment very close to you, holding it tightly, not letting go of it. You can even have a sense that there are others around you trying to take it away from you, to pull it from your arms. And notice what happens to your mind. Do you cling harder and grasp at the object with more energy? How long do you think you can sustain this for? How does it feel to be clinging desperately like this? Is your mind calm and stable when you do it? So having noticed how clinging so hard takes so much of your energy and disturbs your peace of mind, now see what happens if you gently open up your arms, let go of the object of attachment, but allow it to remain there. Taking a step back, and then another one. And once you have some distance between yourself and your object of attachment, allow it to stay and even see if you can enjoy its presence. So how does your mind feel now? Do you see a difference from the previous experience? Do you feel calmer and more relaxed as you release your grip on the object? And finally, you can actually allow the object to dissolve, slowly and gently letting go of it. You can even imagine that you offer it to someone who really needs it, would really appreciate it. And again, notice your emotional reaction to this. Notice how the mind feels by letting go. And to conclude, you can contemplate on the fact that the mind of attachment creates problems for yourselves and for others. But we can choose to relate to things in a lighter way, without this quality of grasping and clinging. So let that thought sink in. And slowly and gently coming out of the meditation. So there's a little story I always like to tell when we do the meditation on attachment. And I think it really makes a very good point on how attachment is. So it's this story about a king who had this very, he had a lot of wealth and a huge state and his palace, and he was very, very wealthy. But he was quite interested in spiritual teachings, and so he had this teacher who was basically one of this sadhus, this wandering yogis that go around life and wearing a loincloth and nothing else. And so the only two possessions of his teacher were a wooden staff and a wooden bowl that he would carry around with him. And so one day the king and the teacher are outside in the palace garden, which is more like a forest, very, very huge. And so all of a sudden, the teacher is giving him some spiritual teachings, and all of a sudden a guard comes running in and he says, Your Majesty, you have to come very quickly. The palace is burning. And the king looks at him and goes, don't you see I'm receiving teachings right now? Go away, it's okay. And so the guard is perplexed and he looks at the king, but he goes, but Your Majesty, everything is burning. There will be nothing left. And the king looks at him and says, it's okay, go, no worries. And then all of a sudden the teacher gets up, what do you mean it's okay? My stuff and my bowl are in there. So basically it really comes to show that you can have a lot of things, there can be a lot of material possessions, and you can have no attachment to them. There's no mind of clinging, and you can have very little and be very attached to it. So it's not a matter of the objects, but rather the attachment that we have towards them. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. And so now we'll go into the dedication. So for this, I'll share my screen with you so that we can do the prayer together. So let's dedicate and offer the merit of this session, whatever positive potential, whatever virtuous action we've done, offer it to all sentient beings. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and find repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefit in each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the mysteries. Okay.
All right. So thank you, Felipe, and thank you everybody else for coming and staying and contemplating and listening, and please come back tomorrow. See you then.
See you all tomorrow. Thank you, Venerable. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.